procedure, and process problem as much as it is a flawed business idea. Standards, regulation, and oversight do tend to help from the perspective of forcing you, either through soft power like SROs and memberships, and hard power through explicit regulation, in getting at least to that statement of safety. It is important to point out that this was not an unregulated business, and there's been enormous amounts of discussion about, well, how should cryptocurrency react? Look at the unregulated cryptocurrency. This is frankly a centralized business failing. Bitcoin was not hacked. Ethereum was not hacked. Cardano was not hacked. None of the big chains were hacked. Crypto didn't fail. People failed. People in positions of trust. At the end of the day, as much as we like to believe in the principles of cryptocurrency, this had everything to do with people putting their money in centralized exchanges and organizations entrusting centralized businesses to do something on their behalf. That's the very industry we're trying to get rid of with the cryptocurrency space. Unfortunately, it's going to now be conflated, and there's a very high possibility that the fallout of this will be new legislation. Hopefully decent legislation, but there's a strong possibility that it won't be. As members of this industry, we're just going to have to live with it, and we're going to have to figure out ways to integrate and deal with it. But this is unfortunately the consequence when you have people who don't know what they're doing get into positions of power and trust and create cascading and catastrophic damage. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If you look at the financial relationships that FTX had, as we go down the list, it could create a cascade of insolvencies. And unfortunately, crypto doesn't get a bailout. Our competitors do. TradFi lives with that every day. They'd already be calling up their buddies in government saying, how big of a check can we haggle over? With crypto, we don't get that. We just get the privilege of cleaning up the mess and then being blamed for it and having to deal with the financial outcome ourselves. Now, I do believe this is not going to kill cryptocurrency. I do believe that our industry will be much stronger in the future, and I do believe that our best days are still ahead of us. This said, I do believe that unlike Mt. Gox, unlike Celsius, unlike Luna, and past events, FTX does have the unique property that it could end up being the straw that breaks the camel's back and changes, at least in the short to midterm, how cryptocurrencies work in America. In particular, changes the appetite lawmakers have for giving the industry a pro-growth freedom mandate. We could look at a world where non-custodial wallets are no longer permitted in the United States. We could look at a world where every cryptocurrency except for Bitcoin is labeled a security and forced to comply with onerous regulations which will rob them of liquidity and not provide any consumer protections or investor protections. If you believe that they do, I will remind you that a huge amount of tech stocks are down 90% this year. And I will remind you that Bernie Madoff ran a regulated entity. So don't believe for a moment that additional regulation, if blindly applied, is going to solve any particular problem for the industry. But now that is a possibility. It is also a possibility that we could see a mass consolidation of the regulated infrastructure in this industry towards the hands of just a few players who will then form an oligarchy, which is not possible to displace and will basically end the American cryptocurrency marketplace as we used to enjoy it. Now, I'm not saying this will happen. I'm saying that the probability of these types of things happening is now greater as a direct result of the failure of FTX. The reason being is that unlike Celsius and Luna, the principals at FTX had a direct relationship with many politicians in Washington, D.C. Already on Twitter, you may have noticed many pictures of politicians, mostly on the left, but some on the right, and Sam Brinkman and his cohorts. He made no small deal out of the fact that he was dumping millions of dollars into elections and into influence and lobbying to try to push through specific legislation. That meant that there are a lot of politicians who now don't want to have that relationship, and as a result will probably try to scrub it by becoming unnecessarily harsh on cryptocurrencies as a predictable reaction. That's why the needle's moved a lot. In addition to the consumer losses that are going to occur, the institutional losses that are going to occur, and potentially the set of cascading failures that can occur. This industry doesn't seem to have learned its lesson. The YouTube podcaster class that mock the Cardanos of the world and talk about how stupid we are and how small our TVL is and these types of things. They continue to be arrogant and petulant. They continue to peddle snake oil advice. They continue to recommend people dump large sums of money into completely unvetted programs and projects. It is what it is. I hope the audience is wise up and realize that maybe their advice has been horrifically bad this year and last year and so forth. More projects continue to get funding without really that much due diligence. And it's very clear that VCs continue to be quite interested in getting involved in these things. I believe one of the investors in FTX was Sequoia. It was supposed to be one of the smartest and best put together VCs in the entire business. And they took a significant loss from their time at FTX. Celebrities have been impacted as well. Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen, for example, had a considerable amount of money in FTX, as did others, who will undoubtedly now become quite disenfranchised and potentially leverage their considerable networks to attack and criticize the industry. At what point does the industry stand up and say, we've had enough, things need to change, and we need to think of a new path forward? For our part, the mission is unchanged, the approach is unchanged, because this is what we think everybody should be doing. Come the 18th, in just 7 days, I'll be in Scotland. There, we're going to announce the Edinburgh Decentralization Index to begin measuring the decentralization of cryptocurrencies. We do recommend that best practices for the operations of exchanges be set forward and people start following them. We do recommend that also in DeFi, we get a lot more honest about what can and cannot be done as an industry and start coming together on basic standards for this type of thing. Smart contract security standards and symmetrical functionality standards. I hope people begin to wise up. I also hope that people understand that nothing is for free in life. You cannot get massive returns and massive yields. They have to come from somebody. Not too long ago, last year, I criticized the big surge of Doge. Not because I had anything against the founders of that project or the people participating in it, but because it so perfectly epitomized the attitude of get rich quick. Every single person I knew who was purchasing that currency was doing so because they had a mistaken belief that they could double, triple, quadruple their money in a matter of days, weeks, or months. And the vast majority of them lost it. That is a mentality which will end the cryptocurrency space if it's preserved and maintained. It has always been the goal to focus on our side of the aisle, use and utility and adoption, and the fact that this really is an industry that can fundamentally transform and change things. There is no other way. If you get hurt in a place like Congo or Burundi, or while skiing in Aspen, and you live in Canada, for your medical records to be seamlessly transmitted while you're unconscious to the doctors trying to take care of you there. Blockchain solved that problem. There is no way that we will be able to rebuild the entire world's supply chains, given that there are many nations, many laws, and such a large global footprint to comply with ESG mandates that are being haggled on by world nations. There is no way that we can ever get to a point where every person is banked. Every person has an identity that they own themselves and has the ability to seamlessly move between one financial system and another without blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. And you cannot separate the two.